Alright everyone, now we have part 2 of today's SCOTUS talk. It's like everything's about the Supreme Court lately. Since Anthony Kennedy announced retirement, it's like, are we going to talk about this or are we going to talk about immigration? And most often they overlap. It's like, will the next Supreme Court justice be an evil, racist bigot like Trump is? And it's like, so stupid. NBC News was caught being honest this morning. I was like, wow. It's actually honest reporting. Now, you can get into the nitty-gritty of the article a little bit different, but if you look at just the title and like the first sentence, again, lie by omission. Technically speaking in Trump's favor this time, the structure of the article actually suggests basically, yay, don't worry about it too much if you're on the left. NBC proclaiming that Roe v. Wade is probably not endangered no matter who Trump puts on the Supreme Court. Now, at this current present moment, that is objectively true. Because Anthony Kennedy was already on the right, the court is relatively a moderate court. Even if you were to put a hardliner from the right wing on the court, there would still be a Robert swing vote in favor of Roe v. Wade at this point. You'd have to wait till Ginsburg retires or, dies in her sleep or something if she gets replaced by someone on the center right, which I expect to happen, by the way. I expect the Republicans will play a little hardball with Ginsburg in a show of force against someone that they really, really detest. She's so far out to lunch that even Trump, who is essentially a centrist business Democrat from Manhattan, he's a big city tycoon Democrat, fundamentally. That makes him part of the blue dog crowd by default. He's a fiscal Democrat in some ways. He's going to put someone who's more of a moderate in that position. The court will actually be more moderate once Trump reshapes it. Especially since he's likely to get another far-right person who will keel over in his second term. Again, replace him with someone on the center-right. Then the court is effectively stacked, but at the same time has more swing votes. That would be a much better and more healthy arrangement. And it's not going to piss off the left enough to get him to turn out enough to stop you. It'd be funny. Worst thing he could do is try to put another Gorsuch on the court right now. Turnout gives the Democrats possible control of the Senate, and then they can stop him from doing literally anything for the next 2 years. It'd make him Obama 2.0 for all intents and purposes. Obama had the House and Senate, it's going along. 2 years later, nothing that you do is going to be accomplished other than you can destroy the healthcare system and pass some executive orders. Trump legislating via executive action would be problematic too, because a lot of people, including centrists, didn't see Obama as tyrannical. They should have, because he was doing this. It was unacceptable. But ultimately, they gave him a pass. Some of them blame the Republicans for obstructing, which is half true. Trump would just be called a tyrant constantly, though. Oh my God, he passed another executive action. He's doing exactly what Obama did, but he's not Obama, so it's not okay this time. They've admitted, though, that Roe v. Wade is not endangered by his SCOTUS pick. First and foremost, Anthony Kennedy already being on the right leads to a centrist court for the meantime. Up until Ginsburg, who is the oldest, I believe, justice, again, keels over. She'll be 87 at the end of Trump's first term. She will not survive his second term. It would be almost impossible. Again, you look at the average lifespan, it's just not sane. It's much more reasonable to suggest at some point she dies of old age. She's had what? She's had 2 types of cancer, I think. She has a stent in her heart. She's not exactly the most healthy individual in the world either. She's not exactly like Justice Roberts or something, or Kagan. She's no longer a spring chicken. Instrumental with certain aspects of leftist decisions, but I mean, at some point the left is going to have to tell her she's got to resign anyway. They'll probably be like, oh, hold on for another couple of years, we'll impeach Drumpf, and then the Democrats will come along and replace you. Something like that. It's like, why do you think Anthony Kennedy chose now to retire? It wasn't just a function of, hey, I'm getting older or something. Well, if that was the case, he could have retired a couple of years ago. And there was already speculation at the time, but he's like, well, I don't want Obama to replace me with, again, a Merrick Garland. Be interesting to hear him weigh in on it. The Supreme Court justices have a tendency to be very tight-lipped with regards to the political situation at large. Ginsburg actually breaching decorum to call out Trump last year and got in trouble for it. Even people on the left are like, hey, don't do that. You're supposed to be above the political fray. You're just supposed to interpret the Constitution and decide whether laws are actually legal and stuff. NBC is admitting this, though, because no sane Republican is actually going to attempt to make Roe v. Wade a substantial issue. The Republicans would be, trust me, they back down and get cowardly on something like immigration, where they've technically got the high ground even in polling. So what makes you think that they would stand their ground on saying, well, we got to think of them babies and end all abortion? It's not going to happen. I'm sorry, but this is just being dredged up as a fear tactic by the left for the midterms. And they've done this before. Like I think I talked about this during 2016 when they briefly tried to make it an issue. And it's like, hey, Trump came out years ago in support of gay marriage, essentially. So I don't know why you would be fear-mongering on that issue. As far as abortion, he said, well, you know, he waffles around. I'll tell you what Trump's actual beliefs are about abortion. He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't see it in terms of morality because he's a business tycoon. He sees it in terms of the fiscal side, and he says, well, it's basically a zero-sum game. I don't care about it. That Trump is a money president. He's not a moral haranguer. He's not a Bible thumper. He's probably not religious. Hell, he might be an atheist. He probably doesn't have any particularly deep-seated religious beliefs at all. He's born and raised in New York City. He's lived in a Manhattan penthouse. He's used to stabbing people in the back. He's closer to a money changer than he is to a Christ figure. In all honesty, I'm not saying that as an insult, by the way. For you who are religious, of course, I'm a pagan. I don't see that as a problem. He's a capitalist. He's supposed to make money. He's not supposed to be moral. No, you don't want U.S. business firms to be moral. The way you constrain them from any evil is anti-monopoly laws and antitrust laws and through public action. But don't expect them to be moral actors because they never will be. That's stupid. It's not pragmatic to believe. It'd be a great world if business leaders could be moral actors. They can't be. We see this with tech firms and censorship every single day. They pretend. It's just pretense. Roe v. Wade will be the law for a very long time. Hopefully it'll just continue on and just be enshrined, and over time nobody will care about it. And that's what tends to happen. It's like, you remember shortly after gay marriage became federally legal, all these like hyper-religious people, including some of you, were like, oh, we'll take to the streets and we must reverse this. We must do all we can to eliminate this evil anti-constitutional statement of, you know, them sodomites being allowed to get a piece of paper from the state because somehow this impedes upon our religion. How many people are talking about it right now? Including a lot of people on the far right. Look, none of the mainline Republicans have the balls to address it. They know that they lost. And some of these people are still sane enough to comprehend political strategy. Trump understands it. Look, he beat up on Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, very strong candidate in the past. Yeah, she sort of has her own problems. Trump laid waste to her. He robbed her of the entire Rust Belt minus Minnesota. That's pretty big accomplishment, dude. I have no doubt that he's not going to make that an issue. He'd be crazy if he made Roe v. Wade an issue. He might allude to it to some far-right crowds. But he knows also that elections in the past, if a candidate went to a state or an event in a state, they could play up to the crowd they were talking to, and it would be at least a few days, generally speaking, before the national media could jump down their throat if they said something that would have been inconvenient on a national level. And they're very good at weaving their language so that doesn't happen anyway. Donald Trump understands, though, because he's the first truly social media, Twitter, and YouTube-driven president, the 4chan president, so to speak. He knows that if he says anything, there will be 10 gadfly reporters waiting there to spin his words and to report on it and say that he's Satan incarnate. He knows this. So I think he's actually way more careful with his language usage. It's just like when he accidentally misspells something in a tweet. He does it on purpose. He knows how to spell. They talk about his speeches being below the 6th grade level. Okay, so they're about on par with other political speeches. You've got to simplify your language if you're making political speeches. You can't sit up there and lecture people like a college professor. What happens when you listen to some PhD who just drones on and on like an asshole about something? After 5 minutes, you're not listening to them. That's not the way to energize a crowd. You keep it pithy. You keep it short. Trump's not going to endanger Roe v. Wade. He probably supports Roe v. Wade more than anything. He's a Manhattan business Democrat. Will you people stop fear-mongering? And I told people that the liberals were going to do this. They're going to try to revert to these wedge issues. I don't think it'll work. We might actually see this particular wedge issue die based on if the Democrats do poorly, if they make it a major issue, regardless of who Trump puts in as his SCOTUS nominee. And they'll get confirmed probably on the first go. Regardless, though, if the Democrats still, they don't take the House, they lose support in the Senate, state houses, it's like, you know, who cares? They probably will hemorrhage that wedge issue. It'll be like the Republicans giving up gay marriage. You remember Bush used to harangue about it, despite the fact that, again, he was a blue-blooded Connecticut native. He wasn't some rope-a-cattle Texan, I got 2 6-shooters and a lot of oil and I love Jesus. That's not him. That was a game he played. That was his public image in order to get rural voters to pile on board so that he could win in certain swing states where those groups had to turn out in large numbers to counter the fact that Clinton remained popular and Al Gore happened to be his vice president at the time. That's why he did that. Said less about it with John Kerry. He was more focused on, well, I'm just pure Americana. There's a war going on, so re-elect me. Even though I'm screwing that up too, just re-elect me. Yeah, by the way, I love Jesus. Yeah, it's a bullshit game. I can see right through it. And props to Trump for playing that game. Look, politicians have to. Unfortunately, we've got a political structure in which politicians have to lie to people. Now, that lie can be much more benevolent or malevolent. The purpose behind it, the form and function, can be better or worse. I don't really care if Trump plays up religion, but I see through it completely. He's not going to go after Roe v. Wade. That's about all. Peace out.